Nothing we say is investment advice. Please pause on all 3 pages of this disclaimer and read it.
Greetings, Algo artisans. We're going to start with the economic data, and then we're going to jump into the charts. We're going to take a look at Bitcoin, Solana, the euro versus the dollar, GBPUSD, USDJPY, SP500 Futures, Dow Futures, NASDAQ Futures, gold, and silver. Let's jump into the economic data right now. Okay, so Monday the 9th, not a lot going on. At 10:30 p.m. EST, you have some Aussie news that would be possibly pretty wild for the Aussie dollar. It's their rate statement. It's like their version of the FOMC, and that could push price around a lot for any Aussie dollar pairs. Now, these USD items coming out on Wednesday, those might affect markets across the board. Crypto, stocks, you name it. That's just how USD items are. Same with the JPY at this point in time. Not a lot going on Tuesday, so we're just going to look at Wednesday, and the CPI comes out at 8:30 a.m. Wednesday. That is a primary input to what the Fed is going to do with the interest rates. So that's important and could be powerful. You do have the Canadian version of the FOMC, their rate statement. That could be powerful for the loonie. At 7:30 p.m. AUD, employment data coming out for the Aussie dollar. At 3:30 a.m. EST, Swiss franc rate statement is coming out. That could be big for them. 8:15 a.m. EST, the euro's main financing rate comes out. 8:30 a.m. the USD PPI comes out. It's the producer version of the CPI, and again, could be pretty powerful for the dollar and all markets as a whole. Now, the euro is going to have their ECB press conference. That could be big for the euro, and that's going to happen right at 8:45 a.m. EST. Friday's going to be pretty quiet. We have the British pound with their GDP coming out right at the European Open, 2 a.m. EST. So let's jump into the charts. We're going to start with Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin itself might be headed up, although it might need to gather a little liquidity before it does. Long story short, this little green tab right there, that's my algo saying to enter. I didn't enter along at that time, just because I needed some conditions to play before I really obeyed that command, if you will. This big crazy wick with the high wick and the high tail, that was basically a bunch of market making and a lot of large money shaking the weak hands out of the market. And this is a pretty common thing because when you have too many well-positioned people, it can affect the charts in the future. So they want to shake people out to get the weak hands out, and that way it doesn't interrupt their money in the future. And by the way, all those liquidations make a lot of money on the exchanges as well, so they are incentivized to push price around like that. Now, I do think price is more or less ready to head up, but it could go down as low as maybe 93,000. Decent chance if it does that, it'll pop back up. If it does that, we'll look at it at that time. In the meantime, I do think we get a slight pullback, maybe, or just kind of this slow move up until it is no longer slow. That's why I have these different areas with price heading up to about 108,000, where it may or may not take its first break. Solana, on the other hand, I think is going to head down a bit. It may not get down past 220. That seems to be a pretty strong support right there. I did call this move down to 220. On the left here, you see the prior week's prediction being really accurate. I must have erased the week after that, which is last week, and it did. I did call the move down to 220 pretty awesomely. Just go back to last week's video to see it. And right now, I think it's going to head down. It might not get below 225 or 220. I think it's going to go sideways. Once Bitcoin starts to move, I think this will move with it, but that's going to really depend on the volatility of Bitcoin, because sometimes when Bitcoin really makes a move, the other coins actually pull back a bit. So I do think it's going to range more or less between probably 245 and maybe 225 until it doesn't. So not a lot going on there. The euro versus the dollar, you have the prior week's prediction right there headed up. I did think it might get rejected at 105.66, and it did temporarily, but it really pulled right back up and headed up. Now, I do think it's going to head up to this area of liquidity, this prior sort of move down that happened on the way down, and that's going to be at about $1.718. I do think price may either break through that or not, but as price approaches that, my algos are going to give me some more clues as to what's going to happen, and we'll go from there. Very similar to the pound, you have from 2 weeks ago this magenta prediction, and I just left it up there because it's been pretty accurate. Price, of course, did break down before it broke up, but it is breaking up and appears to want to continue to head up. So I'll move this over here. Price could reject at about $1.2850, very possible. If not, it may just continue up as the prior prediction says. And I do think price will have a bit of a harder time getting past about $1.30 in the future. USDJPY, I thought it would break down sooner than it did. It did not. It came back up for some liquidity, so I think it's either going to break down or kind of go sideways until it does. That's what I expect, and I expect that to head down to about $1.4625 or $1.4620 when it decides to break down. In the meantime, I think it's going to range until it does that. SP500 Futures doing exactly what I said it would do, or at least what I thought it would do. This magenta path right there is just literally predicting it. It didn't quite make it as high as I thought. The actual path was really well made. I do think it might slow down a little bit, maybe go sideways, maybe not. There's always that possibility it pulls back for liquidity, as you will see the Dow has done, and that would take it back down to about 6,050. But I do expect price to head up to my target by the end of the year of 6140, and then again it might happen at the end of the week. We almost made it up there last week, could happen this week. Dow Futures pulling back for some liquidity. I think it's going to grab some at this prior high, which is about 44,550, and then probably bounce back up. The prior week's prediction was relatively correct. It went sideways, but then instead of going up, it went down. Algos gave me the clue at that time, so it's basically creating a range right now. Basically a range between 44,700 and 45,180, and it will probably maintain that until it doesn't, but if it breaks down, I think it will break back up. A lot of that's going to depend on what's going on with the markets. But we did see, especially with the NASDAQ, which we're going to see next, we saw that the plunge protection team was in and protecting price. So let's go to the NASDAQ. NASDAQ Futures doing what I said it would do, but even quicker than I said it. So NASDAQ was interesting. It wanted to head down a few weeks ago. Plunge protection team was in. This was the post-Trump pump retracement, and price did want to head down, but you can see that it got held up here 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks down, and it's just heading up and up and up. And I talked about this several videos the last 4 or 5 Sundays. The NASDAQ outperformed all the other indices for most of this year, and it seemed to need to pull back from that overperformance. Now it does seem that it is ramping back up, and over a higher time frame, overperforming, because it has beat the daylights out of these other indices from a relative standpoint. It's made it all the way up to where I said it would make it, almost, well, really all the way up there and then some. So I think it might either just continue straight up to 21.9, which is basically 22,000, which is a Fibonacci extension, or it's possible it could go sideways until it gets enough liquidity to pull up. But I do expect price to head up. Gold went sideways as I had predicted the week before. I had already erased that prediction, but you can go back and look at the video, and I think it will continue sideways until it doesn't. And whichever way it breaks is going to tell us a fair amount about the market. Now, with Syria happening, I'm kind of surprised that gold did not go up a little bit farther. That kind of tells us that the smart money knew that that was going to happen, which should be very interesting from a geopolitical standpoint. But we will not go there. We will just watch the charts. So I do think it'll go sideways until it breaks down or up, and it's hard to say which way that'll be right now. I think high time frame it goes up, but in the medium time frame, that's the case. And the same will be with silver. I do think it's going to just range in between about 31.50 and 29.80 until it no longer does so. That's what I think is going to happen. It could break up, it could break down. 32 is a tricky number for silver. We've talked about this before. Very important people, particularly the COMEX. It's my understanding that they can't have silver go above that. Otherwise, they start to lose a lot of money. So for the moment, we're going to see it probably knock its head on 31.50 or 32. And if it goes higher, it'll probably get pushed back down like we saw here a few weeks ago. Thanks for watching. As you can see, my predictions are pretty accurate. Not always correct. Nobody is always correct, but it's pretty accurate. If you want to know how I do this, come to algofactory.tech. We teach people how to build a trading plan. We teach people how to use some of this data on the bottom of the screen, and some of it just basic price action, supports, resistances. We teach you how to predict the path in the future of price, and anytime you can do this to any statistical degree of accuracy, you can extract money from these markets. You don't have to know how to code. You don't have to know any of that fancy stuff. I have taught people how to do this of all education levels, and understand that, yes, I have this algo that I built with these tabs that you can see on the screen, and that's fancy and that's great and they're very accurate. I can teach anybody how to build the recipe for these, and then you just pay somebody else to code it. And that's what I've done. So that's what I love to do. I have a talent of breaking complex subjects down into digestible parts, and I can do it for almost anybody. Come to algofactory.tech, learn how to trade like a hedge fund pro. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on Tuesday morning, 8:30 AM EST for the live show, and if not, then we'll see you on Sunday for next week's market update. Thanks for watching.